Welcome back. We're still staying with politics. The main opposition party, that's the People's Democratic Party, PDP, had described the 2020 appropriation bill presented to the National Assembly by the President as a voodoo project. The party's national chairman made a comment while inaugurating the party's campaign council and reconciliation committee ahead of the governorship elections taking place in Kogi and Bayelsa State. But the spokesperson of the ruling All Progressives Congress, Mr. Larry Issa Onilu, has described the comments of the PDP chairman as an attempt to distract the ruling government.
It's about 1 month to the November 16th governorship election in Kogi and Bayelsa states. The leadership of the People's Democratic Party is meeting at the party's headquarters to fine-tune strategies that will help the party win the election. It inaugurates campaign councils for Kogi and Bayelsa states and appoints a 5-man committee headed by the former Senate President to pursue reconciliation.
The election in Kogi.
Since last month, when the party held its primaries in Kogi and Bayelsa states, there has been some wranglings amongst members which could affect the chances of the party unless there is reconciliation.
I'm happy that the party has sown the seed of reconciliation. The key to the success of Bayelsa is reconciliation. I will never accept any exercise that will demean and put the former president on the other side.
The work to win Kogi and Bayelsa starts with reconciliation, and I believe also ends with reconciliation. And to show that we are really ready for the future, it has to be about how we can reconcile.
Your Excellency.
Although the meeting is about the upcoming election in Kogi and Bayelsa states, the national chairman of the PDP took a swipe on the ruling All Progressive Congress, describing the 2020 national budget presented by President Buhari as a voodoo budget.
Nothing goes for nothing. Whatever you sow, you will reap. Of course, there's confusion all over the place. Even there's confusion in the presentation of the budget. Because as far as we are concerned, it is a voodoo budget. Voodoo budget to deceive the people.
Meanwhile, the spokesperson of the ruling All Progressive Congress, Mr. Larry Issa Onilu, describes the remark of the PDP chairman as a distraction. The election in Kogi and Bayelsa states are ones to watch out for. Bayelsa is controlled by the PDP, just as Kogi is controlled by the APC. The two parties are, however, in a race to have control over the two states.
A former president of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, Mrs. Boma Alabi, has asked the Senate not to legislate on a maximum punishment for sexual harassment. In an interview with our judiciary correspondent, Shola Shoyele, Mrs. Alabi says the punishment for such offences upon conviction should be left at the discretion of the judges. The Deputy President of the Senate, Ovie Omoagege, had revisited the sexual harassment bill on Wednesday, which was passed by the last Senate but did not receive the assent of President Muhammadu Buhari. The 8th Senate had proposed a 5-year sentence and 5 million naira fine for lecturers convicted for sexually harassing male or female students.
Firstly, I would commend the Senate for saying, look, this is an issue that should come to the front burner. But in my view, that law, thank goodness it didn't pass, because it proposes 5 years imprisonment or 5 million naira for any lecturer convicted of sexually harassing or having intercourse with a student under the age of 18. 5 years imprisonment, at the moment, they could be imprisoned for over 5 years.
Based on the laws that we already...
As they stand. I prosecuted a case for one of the states with the fiat of the Attorney General. It was a rape case. I achieved a conviction, and that rapist was sentenced to 25 years in prison. So why should they get 5 years? Why not 25 years? Why not life? So that bill should propose a minimum of 5 years and a minimum of 5 million. Leave the upper limit to the discretion of the judge so that justice will be properly served. If that is the proposal in the bill, then I'll support it. If it isn't, then I don't think it's good enough and they should go back to the drawing board.
To education now, the lack of vocational and technical training has been identified as one of the factors limiting the full benefits of education from being realized. And this is the position of stakeholders at the Akin Ogunbiyi Foundation Lecture Series held in Osogbo, the Osun State capital, with the theme Education as an input variable for national development. Participants at the forum discussed possible solutions to some of the challenges affecting the sector.
Educationists, politicians, top government officials and traditional rulers are here for one reason: to deliberate on the state of the country's education sector. The guest speaker, Professor Michael Faborudi, urges Nigeria to key into the global trend in the education sector.
When a student gets to the university, he must realize the purpose of his education. And that purpose must drive him to want to change the world for the better by the time he has finished his course. So, when it comes to taking a decision as to the way forward, we don't have to start thinking about the bush. The global agenda has been set, and I feel that we should subscribe to them. And Nigeria actually has subscribed to them, but are we applying them the way they are intended to be applied?
Quality skills education also enjoy prestige.
A panel session dissects issues affecting the sector.
We don't get it right, our country becomes more irrelevant in the world. So the imperative of getting education right is something we must deal with. And education is about much more than know-how and know-why. Know-how is important, know-why is important, but character is critical.
The reason why these children are probably not doing well is how they are being taught and who they are being taught by. Children do not necessarily learn the same way. So these are issues we have seen practically. So it simply means if we do not get basic education right, we're not going to make much progress.
This is the first education colloquium of the Akin Ogunbiyi Foundation. The convener insists a nation's growth and development is dependent on the state of its education sector.
By and large, the more you look at education in Nigeria, its development, its impact, you realize that there are challenges and there are things that need to be done better. And that was why I said, look, we need to come up with this lecture series to be able to be looking at education as a critical factor to national development.
The Oni of Ife, Oba Adeyeye Enitan Ogunwusi, commends efforts to frame such conversation.
It's very important for us to know that education plays a very pivotal role in human development, and that's what we need in Nigeria.
The forum ends with a resolution that reports of recommendations be sent to the government and other stakeholders for consideration and possible implementation.
Still talking education, while public servants in other states across the country are actively clamoring for the payment of the 30,000 naira new minimum wage, teachers in Bayelsa State have continued to appeal to the state government to pay them the arrears of the 18,000 minimum wage. The teachers have, however, decided to embark on an industrial action which has resulted in the closure of all government-owned schools and forcing the students to stay at home while their counterparts in private-owned institutions are in class. Our correspondent, Dobra Timmy Wood, has this report.
These children ought to be in school. While their mates are learning and participating in other academic activities, they are here by the riverbank playing. Recently, there's been an increase in the number of children hawking wares at the market and on the streets of Yanagwa during school hours. This is has been a huge cause of concern for most Bayelsans, as the present administration in the state, in its first tenure, declared a state of emergency in the education sector in the state. But that sector seemed to be nosediving, as teachers in Bayelsa State have stopped teaching due to the non-payment of their arrears.
It's sad to see that up till now, schools have not resumed. You know, in every given society, education is the basics of the foundation. And if a government is paying lip service to a sector as important as the educational sector in Bayelsa,
government-owned schools are all locked, and the compound filled with overgrown grass.
You go to some primary schools, the headmaster is the only person in the school. And in some communities too, community people have to contribute money to engage 2 or 3 private persons to complement in government school. So if you juxtapose this with the declaration of emergency on the education sector, it's a huge minus.
We spoke with the secretary of the Nigerian Union of Teachers, and he explains the demand of the teachers.
This has to do with the 18,000 minimum wage arrears, salary arrears that has been paid to all other civil servants except the teachers in Bayelsa State. The teachers that were verified in 2017 to date, they have not been paid. They have been verified, cleared by the verification teams of government, but their salaries of 4 or 5 months were not paid till today. We also have other issues, litany of issues.
Many people believe that the reward of teachers is in heaven.
Teachers' reward should not be in heaven. Teachers' reward should be on earth. I don't know the bulk of money that will take to sort the issues out, but I know that teachers' salaries are hand to mouth. I don't think they are too juicy or too bulky that a state like Bayelsa cannot accommodate.
According to the secretary of the NUT, the union has made several attempts to get their demands met.
That was why we informed government, followed due process, went to the Federal Ministry of Labour and Productivity to lay our grievances and filed 3 disputes against the state government so that they can now pay attention. In fact, all our efforts to see that government resolve this matter with us failed, and that was why we went into to embark on the strike action.
Efforts to get a response from the Commissioner of Education was unsuccessful, as he couldn't be reached on phone and wasn't in his office during the period we visited the education house in the state. Dobra Timiwood, Channels Television News.
The NSC has tinkered with some of its rules. Kayode has that and other stories on Business News.
Well, that's right, Melinda, and you're welcome to Business News. The Nigerian Stock Exchange has amended its rules on pricing methodology, which represents the price movements of equities traded on the exchange. The amendments, which became effective on Friday, October the 11th, relates to the minimum trade quantity required to change the prices of stocks. With the review, the minimum trade quantity required to change prices for equities will now be 100,000 units for all security groups, while trades lesser than the 100,000 threshold will not result in any change. The revised pricing methodology, which differs from the previous 3-tier pricing rule, is expected to ensure overall market stability and efficiency. And members of the newly inaugurated committee to ensure transparency and accountability in the distribution of petroleum products across the country are in Lagos to begin the tracking of vessels and trucks carrying petroleum products. The committee, which was inaugurated by the Minister of State for Petroleum, Mr. Timipre Silva, says technology has been deployed in the scheme to help the country efficiently account for the actual consumption volume of products.
When it comes to the issue of petroleum products, its refining, production and distribution, the national attention it generates can be excused on the altar of the fact that crude is Nigeria's major revenue earner and we are largely a fossil fuel dependent economy. Those numbers and the consequent discrepancies that follows have got President Buhari worried lately.
I want to, with the permission of the
In response, a tax team has been set up by the Minister of State for Petroleum, nicknamed Operation White.
For that powerful delivery.
This gathering consists of members of that committee, top management of NNPC, all unions, marketers, downstream operators and players in the industry. They are in Lagos to kickstart terms of their mandate.
The task for us is to ensure that the petroleum product supply and distribution chain in Nigeria is completely devoid of illicit practices, including oil theft, diversion, and smuggling of petroleum products, which constitute economic sabotage and hemorrhage of the national revenue through high cost of under-recovery.
Depending on who you are asking, the figures of the nation's daily consumption of petroleum products varies from 40 to 60 million liters for PMS. Truth is, some of that is smuggled to the neighboring countries in an attempt to arbitrage.
Initiative is to properly capture data, analyze it, and advise important stakeholders for decision-making and actions where necessary.
Putting it more succinctly, the team lead speaks to the benefit that will accrue from the task.
We will be able to give Nigerians an account of what we import and what we are consuming. And if there's any discrepancies under the current administration agenda, particularly the GMD, where he wants everything to be transparent, accountable, with performance excellence, which we call TEP, we will put it together. And then everybody will see it and we'll all make the decision together because there's not going to be opacity around our data.
Reports from the border closure already suggest that some losses have been checked. However, with technology for this assignment, more discoveries will be made. Olu Phillips, Channels Television News.
And that's business news for tonight. Thank you for watching. I am Kayode Okikiolu. It's back to you, Melinda.
Many thanks, Kayode. Still ahead on the news at 10. Super Eagles head coach Gernot Rohr denies reports of plan to quit his job after Sunday's friendly against five-time world champions Brazil. That's the sports news. Join us again.